What's going on, guys? It's Nick here, back with another video, the must-own wide receivers for the 2019 fantasy football season. And I know I've already talked about some of these players, but this is a video that brings together my favorite picks from the early, middle, and late rounds of the draft. So I might make a top 5 sleepers video or talk about some of the players going in the middle of the draft, but if you make this list, these are the guys I want on my team more than anyone. So how about we set a new goal for ourselves? You guys have reached, or are about to reach, every single like goal that I've given you, so we've got a new one for you. Let's see if we can get this video up to 1,000 likes. I know it's a massive number, but this is one of my favorite videos of the season, so let's see if we can hit 1,000 likes. And with that, let's start things off with the stat of the day. Yesterday's stat was which rookie wide receiver had the most yards per route run, and the answer might surprise you, was Robert Foster. No one's gotten it yet, but I'm recording this about 2 hours after the video has been released, so that's not super surprising. So today's stat, last season, there were 7 wide receivers with 6 or more targets inside the 5-yard line. However, just 2 of them did so on less than 110 targets. Name one of them, and I will give a point to whoever gets each one first. So there are 2 points up for grabs on this one. Let's see who can get it. Also, want to remind you guys that our draft package is now available. Get my rankings, my player notes, players to target and avoid at each portion of the draft, as well as projections, and also the in-season package that comes with the draft package, where you can see my weekly rankings, my weekly player projections, and my model predictions. It's the least expensive draft package in the entire industry, and you can get it for free for those of you who can't afford the $20. So head on over to our website, thefantasyfootballadvice.com, and download all of that. But let's start this breakdown. I have 8 wide receivers I want to talk about today, and let's start things off with Michael Thomas. I preach. This is one of my biggest things I try and get people to understand, is preaching safety in the first 4 rounds. Once you leave the 4th round, you're allowed to start assuming pretty much as much risk as you want, and that risk kind of goes with how risky your early round picks were. But I say go safe. First 4 rounds, you want these guys to be locks, and it does not get any safer than Michael Thomas. Michael Thomas has more receptions over his first 3 seasons than any other player in the history of the NFL in their first 3 seasons by 33 receptions. So you take any player's first 3 years, Michael Thomas beats the next best in receptions by 33. He also has the 3rd most fantasy points per game over that stretch of time, just behind Randy Moss and Odell. His first 3 seasons, he's averaged 107 receptions, 1,262 yards, and 6.7 touchdowns, including 125 for 1,409 last season, which was a season with the 4th highest approximate value of any wide receiver ever. He's also been a model of health. He's missed just 1 game in his entire career. This offense runs through Kamara and Michael Thomas. He is the perfect wide receiver to grab at that turn in the 1st and 2nd round. You guys saw my last mock draft Monday this week, where I paired Michael Thomas with Julio. That kind of floor and upside combination shouldn't be available in the 2nd round, but that's where he's going, and I don't really see it rising. This isn't a case where people are just missing and soon he's going to be like a mid-1st round pick. There's not a ton of room for him to move up in drafts, but he should be a middle of the 1st round pick with what he's giving you. But you get him in the early 2nd round. He's finished as a wide receiver 7, 6, and 6 over the last 3 seasons. But I think this is the year where he jumps into the top 3, and he could easily end up as the wide receiver 1. He has absolutely massive upside, and he's got the highest floor of any wide receiver. You cannot get a better floor than what Michael Thomas has. So he's an absolute stud. Another wide receiver I absolutely love early in drafts is Juju. Remember the things I said about Michael Thomas and his safety? Well, the exact same thing is happening with Juju. He has the 4th most receptions of all time through the wide receiver's first 2 seasons, and that was with AB there. Antonio Brown accumulated 168 targets last season. Just try to wrap your head around this. Juju Smith-Schuster had 166 targets last year, and now 168 have been vacated by one player. They're just gone. All those targets are up for grab. So please, just please, do not listen to the people who tell you that he's going to be bad because he's the number one now. That is not a legitimate argument. A legitimate argument, an actual concern, and one that is likely to come true, is that there is a chance he regresses on a per target basis. Maybe he's less efficient, but if you look at their wide receiver core, it is lacking talent. And it is lacking playmakers, to be quite honest. Plus, they're going to find themselves down more than usual. So 180 targets is well within his range of outcomes. My latest projection, as of yesterday, has him at 175 targets. That means he's now edged past Davante Adams as my top overall projection. Do I have him ranked 1? Absolutely not. But any wide receiver who's projected at 175 targets is well worth considering for your top overall ranking. You might ask, well, why do you have Adams ranked higher then? Well, it's just because there is a concern that he regresses more than I have projected on a per target basis. I have him at 3%. I think it's 3% on receptions per target and 3% on yards per reception. That's how much I have him regressing from his career numbers. And maybe it's slightly more than that. But any player, again, that's going to see as many targets as he has is definitely a good pick where he's going in drafts. With Adams, we just know what the offense is going to look like. I'm by no means saying don't take Juju, but with Adams, there's just a little bit less risk. There isn't much risk with Juju, but there's zero risk with Davante Adams. So that's why I have Adams as my 1. I actually have Juju at 5th in my rankings. It's 1 spot above ECR, 1 spot above ADP. Rankings aren't final, so he could obviously move up and down from there. But for where he's going in the draft, you've got to pounce on that because he could easily lead the league in targets. And we know that Big Ben likes to lock in on people in the red zone. So could he lead the league in targets and in touchdowns? Absolutely. That's in his range of outcomes. He's put together an incredible first 2 seasons, something that we've only seen done a few times better than him. So I definitely like taking him in the second round. Another player that I love that I really haven't talked about that much is Julian Edelman. And since becoming a full-time starter in 2013, I'll show the splits of in split being Gronk played, out of split being Gronk didn't play. If you regress his stats for Gronk not playing over a full season, it's 181 targets, 116.8 receptions for a little under 1,300 yards and 5 touchdowns. And that stat line would have finished inside the top 10 last year. With Rob Gronkowski gone, he's going to see more targets. He's going to see more receptions because of that, which means also more yards. And the touchdowns are down in the split, but he's never been a prolific touchdown scorer. So if you take Gronk off for the entire season and they need to shift their offense entirely around because they really don't have a touchdown scoring tight end, it's certainly possible that he sees a spike more towards that 7 or 8 touchdowns in the season. So I wouldn't look too much at the touchdowns going down. I would honestly expect his projection to increase in that front. But Edelman has the 13th highest projection, according to my model, and the projection is extremely reasonable. The only risk with Edelman is his health. He has struggled to stay healthy over his career, and he's got one of the highest projections for games missed, according to Sports Injury Predictor. Fortunately, that's his only risk. He's going to produce every single game that he plays, and he very rarely has down games. I mean, since 2015, he has just 3 total games with less than 6 targets, and in those games, his stat lines were 4 for 84 in a touchdown, 4 for 53, and 4 for 120 in a touchdown. So he barely ever is under 6 targets, and when he was still producing. So this is a guy who's going to score numbers when he's on the field. Edelman's currently coming off the board as a wide receiver 15 in the 4th round, and the only way he doesn't hit that value is if he gets hurt. And even then, on a per game level, he's probably still going to hit it. So if he's hurt for 4 weeks, then just slide in one of the late round guys I'll talk about and take those points for those 4 weeks. Because you're not taking a 0. It's not like, oh, Edelman's out this week, guess I don't get points for my wide receiver position. No, there's a ton of wide receiver value this season. So just slide one of those guys in while Edelman's hurt and then pull him back out when Edelman comes in. So I 100% sign off on Edelman. Next wide receiver, DJ Moore. And DJ Moore played in both of the games that Funchess missed last season. His stat lines were 8 for 91 and 4 for 81. And that is an extremely small sample, I know. But the thing we need to consider are the targets in that offense. The majority of the targets will be dispersed between McCaffrey, Moore, Samuel, and Olsen. Aside from that, there's just going to be small amounts of volume, here and there. Moore has the 14th highest projection, according to my wide receiver model. I have him projected for 74, a little under 1,200 yards, and 5 touchdowns. So that sounds great, right? But where's the risk? Because he's obviously going too late if that's the projection. There is none. There is no risk. He has the 5th lowest chance to miss time due to an injury, and there's a 0% chance that he gets passed on the depth chart. And if anything, Newton's going to be better than he was last season. Every single bit of data points towards Moore having a breakout season this year. Moore was a first-round pick last year, boasts an 88th percentile height-adjusted speed score, 94th percentile burst score, 89th percentile catch radius, 92nd percentile SparkX score, 97th percentile college dominator rating, 98th percentile college breakout age. He just turned 22, and he's already the Carolina Panthers' #1 wide receiver. He was first in the league in yak per reception last season among wide receivers with at least 30 receptions, and Newton had the highest adjusted yards per completion of his career when targeting Moore last year. He also saw 8 or more targets in 5 of his last 7 weeks. I have him as the wide receiver 18, 6 spots above ECR, and 11 spots above ADP. This is a good pick. Do not let anyone tell you that DJ Moore is not a good pick. He is a fantastic pick. It is a consolidated target share in Carolina. Newton is going to have a better season than he did last year, and Moore is an extremely talented wide receiver. So get him on as many teams as possible. 5th on the list, Christian Kirk. And last season was a disappointment for the entire Cardinals offense. You will never hear me say otherwise. It was a massive disappointment, so it is not surprising that his rookie numbers did not look good. But the Cardinals ran the 2nd fewest plays per game and were last in points per game. This season, they project to be in the top 5 in plays per game, leaning more towards the pass. And I will go on the record saying they will not be dead last in points per game this season. I can guarantee you that. Kirk is going to be the Cardinals' top wide receiver this season. I love Andy Isabella. Larry Fitz has had a phenomenal career. But this season, it's Christian Kirk. He's going to be the #1. Kirk was a 2nd-round pick last season, had a good college dominator rating, a good SparkX score, an extremely early breakout age. My current projection is 68 receptions for 852 yards and 5.5 touchdowns. That is not a crazy projection. You look at that and you say, yeah, he can absolutely hit that. That's not crazy at all. Even at that projection, he is undervalued as the 33rd wide receiver off the board, going the late 7th to early 8th round. Even that modest projection, that is not crazy at all, and he could easily beat, has him undervalued for where he's going right now. You got to get the old Cardinals offense out of your brain, because it's not going to look that way this season. It's going to look completely different. They're going to be completely different in plays per game and points per game. So you've got to forget what you saw last season and think about how they're going to look this year. And if they look like we're projecting them to look and how they should look, then Christian Kirk is absolutely being undervalued. And I really don't see his ranking increasing, because there are so many people who will not draft a Cardinals player just because of what they saw last season, even though it's going to be completely different this year. So I don't expect his ADP to increase really at all as the offseason goes along. But let's go even further in the draft, and let's look at the 11th round with Keke Coutee. Coutee averaged 13.7 half PPR points per game in his healthy games last season, averaging a stat line of 7.2 receptions for 76 yards and 0.4 touchdowns. When you look at this roster, you have Hopkins as just a target monster, but after him, the running backs aren't going to demand that many targets. They don't have a good tight end, so you're really just left with Fuller coming off a torn ACL and Coutee. So even given Hopkins, 26, 27% market share, it doesn't matter. There are still a ton of targets remaining for Keke. He's not an incredible athlete, I understand that, but he has an above average SparkX score, he has an above average agility score, and he's an extremely high speed score. He also posted the second most target separation per route among all wide receivers last season, and he was 4th in the highest reception percentage from the slot. My current projection is pretty high on him, but it's not crazy when you look at the overall production of this offense. Deshaun Watson's a good quarterback, and they're going to throw the football. So even, like I said, giving Hopkins a massive target share and a really good projection, I still have Keke for 89, 963, and 4. And because of this, I have him ranked as my wide receiver 32. That's 10 spots above ECR, 14 spots above ADP. The only concern, the single concern, is the hamstring injuries. And just he can't stay healthy, it seemed, from last season. So if he pulls his hamstring in camp, I probably just won't even draft him. I mean, legitimately, if you're watching this video and you're like, yeah, but didn't he just pull his hamstring? Okay, skip to the next part. I will not be drafting Coutee if he pulls his hamstring. I guess he can pull it like the first day of camp and then return and play all preseason games at full strength, and then I'll be fine drafting him. But if the dude pulls his hamstring, and they're like, okay, well, he's questionable for week 1. No, absolutely not. Then I'm jumping ship and I'm not taking him. But as of right now, the dude's fully healthy. And because of that, he's being undervalued by the community. It is another situation. This is what I look for. I look for consolidated target shares, and this team is another one that has a consolidated target share. We know where the targets are going. So at his ADP in the 11th round, you just have to take that value. Another wide receiver going the 11th round. So I guess, maybe only like one of these guys. Just take one of them. I've been trying to get them in the 10th and the 11th round. It's Curtis Samuel. And I already mentioned more. So you're probably sitting here like, wow, what do you just want to draft the entire Panthers offense? I mean, kind of. Maybe not on the same team. Like if you were like, oh, I want McCaffrey and Moore and Samuel, I'd be like, pump the brakes a little bit. But you should be targeting this offense because it's going to be really good. And again, we know exactly where the targets are going. People are scared of Cam Newton's shoulder, but there's absolutely no reason to be concerned. Players come back from these injuries all the time, and he's already back to throwing. He's going to be 100% for camp, so there is no need to feel concerned at all about his shoulder. Samuel suffered a few injuries to end his rookie season and to begin his sophomore season, but when he returned last year, he looked amazing. He's got an 88th percentile SparkX score, 62nd percentile breakout age, and a 100th percentile speed score. Dude's lightning fast. He's a former second-round pick and had 8 targets per game over his final 5 weeks last year, was 14th in fantasy points per route run, 16th in fantasy points per game, and he showed he was able to run a bunch of different route combinations. Earlier in his career, very limited in what he could do in routes, stepped it up big time last year. I see him taking another step forward. He's one of the youngest possible third-year wide receivers, and the Panthers did not add any legitimate wide receiver threats in the draft or in free agency. They got a few guys that, they might throw onto the field, but none of them are legitimate threats to DJ Moore and Curtis Samuel as targets. I have him as the wide receiver 33. That is 8 spots above ECR and 18 spots above ADP, so there should be no excuse for not taking him. If you want to say, well, which one's the 10th and which one's the 11th, I'm going Curtis Samuel in the 10th and then Keke Coutee in the 11th. And if you want another pick for the 12th, you went running back heavy. This is a legitimate strategy. Just bust out as many running backs as you can early in drafts. Just load up on like 7 of them in your first 9 picks. Like that might be a bit excessive. Maybe we can go to 6 or even 5 to be completely honest. But just load up on some stud running backs and you take Curtis Samuel in the 10th. You take Keke Coutee in the 11th. And how about in the 12th round, a guy who's going in the late 13th round in Marquez Valdes-Scantling. His ADP will rise. I don't know how much because I don't have a time machine, but it's going to be higher than it is right now. I will happily take him ahead of that though. Adams is the starting outside wide receiver. He played in the slot 18% of his snaps because the Packers are somewhat intelligent. I think they're going to be much better this season under LaFleur, but they realized last year, hey, Adams is a mismatch. And if we're playing a team that's got a terrible slot corner, why aren't we taking our best wide receiver and putting him in the slot? That's what intelligent people would do. Not every team does it because not every team's intelligent. But at least the Packers were trying to do that. They're trying to exploit matchups with Devonta Adams, who I also think is a great pick. I just, only so many people on the list. So Adams is going to be moved around the formation into different parts and he's just going to play the matchup. So you say, okay, that's a ton of production. Who's next? Well, we have Allison. Allison isn't a good slot receiver. He only lined up in the slot 12% last season. He was by far their worst on a production per play standpoint. There are reports that he's been playing in the slot in camp, but let's be honest, actual training camp has not started yet. And if he does move into the slot on occasion, that's fine. It's not the end of the world for Marquez that, oh no, Allison's in the slot. Well, okay, if Allison's in the slot, it means that Marquez is on the outside, and you can just exploit the matchup there. This offense is going to put people in a position to succeed. It is not something they've done a ton in the past. I know I said that Adams was moved around the formation, but that's about it. All they really did was move Adams. Oh, look, they have a bad slot corner. Put him in the slot. That's really all this offense did. It was very uncreative. This season, I expect them to be better. I expect them to look at the talent they have at their wide receiver positions and be like, okay, we've got Adams as a mismatch. We've got Marquez as a mismatch. On every play, how can I get this guy open? So Marquez is going to be used on drags and screens and slants. Really any way that they can utilize his incredible height-adjusted speed. Remember, this is a guy with a great agility score, a great SparkX score, and a 97th percentile height-adjusted speed score. And let's not forget that his quarterback is Aaron Rodgers. So the sky is the limit for Marquez, and that's not considering Adams' injury. Adams does not need to get hurt for this guy to break out this season. My current projection on him really isn't that great. 58 receptions, 891 yards, and a little under 4 touchdowns. That ends up being the 41st highest wide receiver projection according to the model. I have him ranked at 39 just because I think the projection is extremely attainable and you just have so much upside built into you when Aaron Rodgers is your quarterback. Even that is 16 spots above ECR and 25 spots above ADP. So listen to me. You can end your draft with Curtis Samuel, Keke Coutee, and Marquez Valdes-Scantling. And you know what? They're probably not all going to break out. Actually, I'd be shocked if they all break out. But if you're ending your draft with players like these, they have a ton of upside, they've got a good amount of a floor, and the picks make sense. Remember, this is a process over results channel, and this is a process over results sport. You want to have the best process over and over and over again because that's how you win. Anyone can just get lucky here and there. They can just randomly hit on some guy that they just picked. But that's not repeatable. To have repeatable success, you need to pick the best talent and the best opportunity. You got to understand why you're making these picks and be able to put together a rational argument in favor of every single pick. And I will help you do that with our draft kit. Our draft kit has tiered rankings for every single position. It has a player write-up on all the players I deem that you could really possibly draft. So you know exactly what I'm thinking on all these players. I'm going to tell you who to target, who to avoid in drafts. I'm going to give you my exact projections to download to your own computer and play with. And it has the same thing for every week in the regular season. The rankings and the projections will also be available then. So head on over to our website, thefantasyfootballadvice.com, and check out how you can get our draft kit. And remember about our goal, our 1,000 like goal. I know it's massive. I know that's a really high goal, but I know that you guys can hit it. So with that, that is the end of this video. I hope you guys did enjoy. If you did, how about we hit that like button? How about we subscribe if we are new? And thanks for watching.